Supabase and Clerk are a match made in heaven, having the ability to manage your users with high converting components alongside databases or storage or real-time subscriptions really brings your application to life. And in this video, I'm going to be showing you how you can integrate Clerk with Supabase in a Next.js application. Here is the Next.js application. It's a simple to-do application that has the ability to add to-dos as well as see the current to-dos you have. Now we're in the code, let's talk about what's been implemented already and what is left to do to make this application work. So here we have all our components that draw the UI. They're all under the components folder. And then under pages, we have a sign in and a sign up implementation that allows you to use either OAuth or username and password, whatever you decide in your Clerk application. Now, if you've never set up Clerk before, there'll be a link in the top right-hand corner right now that shows you how to get started with Clerk and Next.js in 5 minutes. Then we also have our middleware here that just controls how the middleware is run with Clerk. Inside our index.js holds the current code that is just stubbed UI and just contains a form that allows you to add. And then underneath is a component that's driven by how many to-dos you have, which is currently just an array of objects. So first we need to go to Supabase and we also need to go to the Clerk dashboard to integrate them together. So I'm in my Clerk application on the dashboard and you want to head over to JWT templates. Select that one, hit new template and select Supabase as your option. So we're going to select Supabase and what that's going to do is it's going to give you these claims by default. It's going to give you the email, the role, and then any app or user data that you may want to include, you can add, but this will suffice for your Next.js application with Supabase. The next thing we need is this signing key, which comes from Supabase itself. So if you head over to your Supabase and you go to your application here, this is our to-do application, you can go ahead and select settings and then go to API right here. And there'll be this JWT secret here that you're going to need. So if you click this reveal button, it will reveal that, and then you should be able to copy it. So let's go ahead and do that. And then head back to the dashboard and paste that into this valid signing key, and then hit apply changes. Now you have a JWT template. This JWT template allows you to integrate with Supabase and show them that this person is either authenticated or has a specific role or whatever you might need to make your application work. At this point, what we need to do is make sure our Supabase has the tables that we want. Then we just need to make a few changes to Supabase to allow our users to be authenticated when they're trying to retrieve data, and then only allowing users that are the same user to update a to-do. So we head back into our Supabase settings here and we'll go to our table editor. So here we have our table that we're going to be used. There is a user ID, which will be the Clerk user ID. We have a created at time, completed at time, and a title and a note. As you can see, RLS is not enabled currently. We need to do a bit of work here to make this work with Clerk and Supabase together. So now we're ready to enable RLS. So you can click this RLS button here and click New Policy, select Get Started Quickly, and then we're going to set a few things. So first, we want to be able to set Enable Read Access for everyone. So it doesn't matter if anyone can read, which is fine. So we'll select True. And what we'll do here is we'll actually set this to Authenticated. So any authenticated users can indeed read from the table. So we'll click this and we'll hit Save. So if you're not logged in, you won't be able to access the API or try and read anything from our Supabase tables. Then we need another policy here, which we can go ahead and do from here. And we're going to say enable insert access for authenticated users only. So it's the same idea, except for we want it for inserts. So we can say review and save policy. So we've got these two policies. And now we need a final one to allow only users that own a to-do to be able to update their data. Now, the way this works with Clerk is slightly different than what you're expecting. There is a policy here that says you could do it with the email, but we want to be able to do it with the user ID that we have. So to do that, you're going to go to this SQL editor right here, select that one. We're going to get a new query here, and I'm going to put all of these queries in the description. So this function is called requesting user ID, and essentially what it does is it uses the JWT to allow us to have access to the user ID. So when you run this function, you're going to get no rows returned, but it gives us access to the requesting user ID from the JWT that's coming from Clerk. So when you click run here, you should get success, no rows returned. Then we need to create a policy that allows us to grab the requesting user ID based upon that. With this, you can just create a policy called authenticated users can update their own to-dos. So obviously, if you're not doing a to-dos app and you're doing something else, make sure you update this. And then you set the auth role to authenticated, and then with check requesting user ID equals the user ID. Then when you run this, you should get success, no rows returned, and then we can go back to our table queries here, back in our table editor, and then go to to-dos, and then go to RLS. What you should see is this authenticated users can update their own to-dos. Now this is create our own policy, and if we edit it here, you'll see this role is authenticated and then requesting user ID equals user ID. And now this will make sure that whatever our user is doing, whether they're trying to complete a to-do or delete it, whatever, anything like that, with the update, they'll be able to do that. And now we have everything set up at this point to start using our application. So first you want to enable RLS. So click enable RLS and click confirm. And now this is enabled. And this means that if you're not authenticated, you can't read anything. And if you're not the owner of a to-do, you won't be able to update it. And of course you have to be logged in to insert it. So now we need a couple of things for our actual Next.js application. So if you go back to settings here and go back to API, you're going to need to take this URL and this anonymous public key, and you're going to put these in a .env.local with your Clerk environments. And both these can be next public because it's okay to show them on the client. Once you've done that, we can start updating our code. So now we're back in the code. The way that Supabase and Clerk works is that when you instantiate the Supabase client, you need to pass in the token for the user so that it knows which authenticated user is being used with a JWT. So we're going to create a new folder here. We'll call it utils. Inside that utils, we're going to create a new file and we'll call it Supabase client.js. And in here is where we're going to create our Supabase client. The first thing we need to do is import create client, and that comes from Supabase/Supabase-JS. Then we need to create an export here that's going to export our Supabase client that we can use anywhere in our application. And we're going to pass in something called Supabase token. And then inside of here is where we're going to actually create a client. So we can do const Supabase equals create client. And then a create client here is going to take two variables, and that's going to be the anon key and then the URL that you previously added to your .env.local. So go ahead and drop those in. So now we have those. Now we need to create our header here. So we can do the set of curly braces, then do the word global, then headers. And then inside of that headers, we're going to have authorization. Then the authorization is going to be a bearer token. So we can do bearer space, then $ Supabase token. And then we can just return Supabase. And this will allow our users to log in into our application using Clerk and then have this bearer token passed down to Supabase at any time we want to make a request. Now remember, JWTs with Clerk are short-lived, so we want to make sure that every time you make a request or an update or whatever, that you request a new token to pass down to Supabase. Now, I prefer to do code splits when it comes to making requests. So I'm going to create a new utils here, and we're going to call it Supabase requests.js, but you could just directly make these requests right in your application, and it's entirely up to you. So now in our Supabase requests, we can import our client. So Supabase client, and that's going to come from Supabase client. And then we can export a const here called get to-dos, and that get to-dos is going to be an async function that's going to take two arguments, user ID and token. So inside of here, we can create the client first. So const Supabase equals await Supabase client. And then we need to pass in the token from our user, which would be a JWT. And then from now, we can actually create our to-dos or whatever we want to use here. So we can say const data to-dos equals, and then await Supabase.from, and the from here will be whatever table we want. So for that table, it's going to be to do. Then we're going to tell it what we want to select. So we're going to select everything. And then we're going to do dot equals here. So user underscore ID, comma, user ID. So we're going to say that we only want the data that this user has. And if they don't have any data, we don't want it. And then we can return to-dos. And now we have this, we can use this in our index.js. So we can update this now by using this Supabase requests to make them. So the first thing we want to do is actually import use auth, and that's going to come from @clerk/next.js. And this gives us the ability to retrieve authentication data when we need it. So now we have use auth, we can do const, and then we're going to user ID and token, and we can pass those in from use auth. And now we have that access to get this whenever we need it. So now what we want to do is do a use effect to grab the to-dos whenever it's a first load and only on a first load. So we can import both use effect and use state from React, and we'll use those to both track that the state is moving and that we can obviously load our data on first load. So now we can use use effect to grab our data from the database. So we can do that by doing use effect, and then we can pass in something here. So we can call it const load to-dos equal to asynchronous function, and we can use this to grab our data. So what we need to do is first we need to grab a token. So using this get token from auth, so we can say const token equals await get token, and we set the template, so template to Supabase, and that is the JWT template that we called it. So whatever you may have called it, I'm assuming you called it Supabase and kept it the default name. That's what we'll be able to use. And then we need to make the request to get to-dos. So we have get to-dos imported up here from Supabase requests. Then we can say const to-dos equals await get to-dos. So we're going to get these to-dos now, and we're going to pass in the user ID. And then we have token, which will be the token that we've loaded here. Now we have to-dos, and we can just say set to-dos equal to to-dos. And at this point, this should all load our to-dos, and then we just need to make sure we actually run this function. So we just write load to-dos, and then we just want to run it once. So we'll just put an empty set here. And now we should be able to load our to-dos in. So let's go ahead and give this a shot. As you can see now, all of that data that we had has loaded in on a use effect, and it is only the data associated with my user ID. But now we need to do this part, which is to add a to-do, which works in a similar fashion to the way that this worked, except for we want to do this on click. So now we can create our new function here. We'll call it export const add to-do, and it will be asynchronous as well. And we'll pass in three things here: the user ID, the token, and the event. And then from there, we can just copy this because it's always going to be the same. We'll do const data / error equals await Supabase from, and then we'll say the same from, so to-dos. And then we'll do dot insert. And what we're going to insert here is going to be the user ID. So user ID, set that to user ID. We'll set the title to event.target0 value, and then we'll set the note equal to event.target1.value. And then we'll say if error log error, and then we'll do a return here. Otherwise, we'll just return data. Now we can use this inside of our index here as part of this type is submit. So in this form submit, we can use it here. So we'll create a function up here that says const handle submit equal to sync event. And then again, we'll do similar to what we did here. First, we need to add our add to do. So add to do, and then we'll pass in that as part of our thing here. So we can just say const to do's equals await add to do, and then we'll pass in event, comma, user ID. And then we'll make sure that we create a token here so that it's fresh, const token, and then comma token. And then we can just console log to-dos for now to make sure that this works. And then we'll go ahead and add it to our submit here. So instead of being this console added, we'll just do handle submit. And now that it's launched, let's give it a shot here and say testing 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and then testing 1, 2, 3, hit add to do. the page refreshed, you can see that it was added down here. So we'll just add one more. So we'll say hello world, testing 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. We can see it's been added here, but the experience is a bit weird, right? So the experience right now is that the user gets a page refresh, which is strange. So we can just go ahead and fix that while we're here. So instead of doing this console.logs, what we can do is actually use this load to dos, right? So we have load to dos. So why don't we just use it? So we can just do the same get to dos here and set the to dos to the same thing. So we could just do const, and we'll just make this add to do. And then we can set it to the same thing. And then we can just do event.prevent default. And that'll stop it from refreshing. And now we should be able to test, and we can click add to do here. And you can see that this has now been requested, but the page doesn't refresh. So there you have it, an introduction to how to use Clerk with Supabase in your Next.js application. If you did enjoy this video, make sure to hit subscribe. And of course, make sure you check out Clerk. All the links will be in the description for this video, alongside any code you may need and a starter guide.